This is part 2 of my series on the Good Shepherd. Now, in here, I'm going to discuss more about Joseph and the term given to him in the Hebrew scriptures, which is ro'et, meaning the shepherd. Now, this is because Joseph inherently had the heart of a shepherd, something that set him apart from his brothers. Now, for that, they threw him in a pit and tried to kill him. I sought more information about Joseph from other Jewish literature, which I do very often, and I found some things in the book of Rabba, Genesis Rabba, which is in Jewish circles about equivalent, if not better, than the book of Genesis. It actually expounds more on Joseph's experience and than what the Hebrew scriptures does. And so I've used some of the information from there in this part of the study. I also looked at the ancient concept of shepherding, and I used references from ancient shepherding contracts from the Mari documents, for example, that were found in the Tel Hariri desert. In order to understand the responsibility and the accountability at every level in shepherding, I divided shepherds into categories, calling them the owner-operator shepherd, the family business shepherd, and the hired servant shepherd. Jesus referred to himself as the good shepherd, so we can see that we have the ro'eh, which is just the shepherd. We have the ro'et for Joseph, which is the shepherd. Now, Jesus referred to himself as the good shepherd. Now, that's interesting. He stated that. And what he actually stated later was that he had not lost one of his father's sheep. Interesting. Father God is the great shepherd. He's the chief shepherd. Jesus said, I didn't lose any one of the sheep except the son of perdition, so that the scripture might be fulfilled. And of course, we know that that is Judas. So Jesus, in turn, when he left, he left the responsibility of caring for his father's sheep to his disciples, and of course, those who followed after them, like us, for example. I likened those that work as shepherds in God's business, in God's kingdom, as being like hired shepherds. And I'm hoping that in part 3 that I'll bring everything together and give you a better understanding of the function of the shepherd in the New Testament and show you how perhaps it's become a little bit tainted, and what the original plan was and what the original role of the shepherd is. I'm also going to look at some few other things which should be quite interesting, I think. So I hope you stay around and watch all parts of this series. Thank you so much. So with that, let's begin. I'll just go to the front. I started off by saying that I taught this series on the Good Shepherd in a church in 2014, and I decided to revisit it because I really think it's a good message and still relevant to us today. And I hope you enjoy and learn something from it. So as I said earlier, for this study, I divided shepherds into 3 categories: the owner-operator shepherd, the family business shepherd, and the hired servant shepherd. Now, the owner-operator shepherd looks after his own sheep, right? He's the type of shepherd, he's accountable for everything, all his sheep. Every sheep is an asset to this shepherd. The shepherd, he sells the dairy, the wool, the meat, whatever. And if he loses one sheep, he loses money, he loses an asset. It's no different to being an owner-occupier in any other form of business. So because no business owner wants to lose money or lose assets. So I classify Father God into this category as some sort of like a chief shepherd. The Bible, the Old Testament, is full of the analogy of God being a shepherd and his people being the sheep. And, the famous Psalm 23 that we all listen to when, people die. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd, God is that big shepherd. He has no issues with calling himself a shepherd, considering he is God, but it gives us an understanding of the relationship. That's what we're after. We're after the understanding of the relationship. We're after the understanding of the function. That's why we're going back so much into the Hebrew. So the next category, the family business. So we have the owner-operator shepherd, who I likened to Father God, the chief shepherd. The family business, I know, sounds a little bit like the mafia, but, I promise you there's no cousin Vinny here. But the son, scripturally speaking, usually the youngest, like David. Now, I also mentioned Rachel in part 1, is left to manage the father's assets. Now, I will include Joseph in this, and you're going to say, but Joseph, he was not the youngest, Benjamin was. The Jewish people consider Joseph to be the youngest son of Jacob and not Benjamin. And the reason being is that there was a lot of problems with the tribe of Benjamin. His mother called him Benoni, son of my pain. His father changed it and called him son of my strength. So I deal very much in the name from an ancient Near East concept of being a person's identity. Okay, now I know names are really mixed up nowadays, and there's all these 2 and 3 different names and words put together to make up names. No, it wasn't like that then. Your name was your identity. So if Benjamin had like 2 names, then, really he has a little bit of an identity crisis, I think. Because what was Benjamin? Was he pain or was he strength? So he was also from one of the smaller, more mixed up tribes in the history of Israel. Now, the JPS Torah series, I love it. I really like it, is the most highly acclaimed, Jewish commentary since the turn of the century. Now, 80 and 90-year-old Jewish scholars, will be sitting there reading their JPS Torah series. And in JPS, Joseph is the youngest because he was the last one born in Pandam Aram. Now, what they liken Pandam Aram was to almost like Jacob's Egypt. It was where he completed his time of servitude to Laban. He finally got his promotion and he received his wages. And it's where he became a man in his own right and got his own sheep. And he got to step out of everybody else's shadow with his, wives and children. So Benjamin was born whilst journeying. Hence, Benjamin's story is a little bit different to Joseph's story. So in the family business, okay, the son is shepherding for the father. It's a family business. The son is now accountable. And we see this very, very much in the life of Jesus Christ. Now, he said he will leave the 99 sheep and go after the one sheep that is missing, and he will bring that sheep back in Luke 15:4. Now, Jesus knew the rules. He also said in John 17:12, and this was his prayer, that, and I mentioned it earlier on, so while I was with them, I kept them in your name, that is, in your character. Those that you gave me, I kept, none of them I lost, except the son of perdition. Now, I was thinking about Jesus' statement. Jesus' statement is phenomenal, that you can actually say to the Father, every sheep that you gave me, I've kept. I haven't lost them except the one that was supposed to be lost anyway. Now, I was thinking, when I stand before God one day, I'm going to have to confess that I have lost a lot of God's sheep over the years, and I just pray that God forgives me, because I've neglected God's sheep. I've not taken the shepherding role of looking after and feeding God's flock very, very seriously. So it's irrelevant whether you're a man or a woman, it's like people focus so much on being a male or a female, whether or not you can do this. Rachel was doing it. She was looking after her father's sheep. She was walking them to be watered and to be fed. and she was looking after them. It's no problem. The Bible calls her a shepherd. It's the same word that's been used time and time again and been translated into the New Testament. So I think that it's, you don't have to be a man in order to be able to feed people. I think you just have to be somebody that actually has information to give them and food to give them. And you get that spiritual food from God, and then you pass it on to others. Simple as that. Anybody can do it. Now that we understand the role the youngest son plays in the family business, let's look at Joseph again, okay? Now, all the sons of Jacob were shepherds, and they were all working together. Now, Joseph was hanging out with Dan and Naphtali, who were the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maid. Now, something went wrong, and Joseph brought his father a bad report. And that's what our Christian Genesis, English version of Genesis says. Brought him a bad report. We're left wondering, okay, what was it? We have a suspicion. I had a suspicion. Okay, now these boys, these other brothers, they are mistreating the sheep. Okay, that's what they're doing. They are doing the wrong thing by their father's sheep. So Joseph tells the father. That was my suspicion all along. And they were not being particularly good shepherds. Now, Christians and Jews differ in their understanding of the book of Genesis. Now, Christians believe every word is written as God gave it. And that's fine. If you want to believe that, that's fine. There's no problems with it. Jews, on the other hand, are fully aware that Genesis is compiled of many other different texts. Okay? And Genesis Rabba, as I mentioned earlier, would be one of them. Jubilees is also called Little Genesis. I believe aspects of Talmud are also in there, and of course Enoch and others. You may not agree with me, but I'm just telling you what Christians believe, and I'm telling you what Jews believe. So there you go. To glean a bit more about Joseph, I was curious to find out what Genesis Rabbah had to say about him. It says that Joseph became proud and haughty, literally using those words. And it confirmed my suspicion that Joseph had caught his brothers slaughtering and eating some of the best sheep. Some of the best sheep, the brothers were knocking them off and were eating them. The father's sheep. Joseph didn't approve of this. So this was in fact the bad report, the accusation that Joseph brought to his father. The Hebrew word for shepherd is ro'eh, but when it refers to Joseph in the book of Genesis and in this instance, it says the ro'eh-et. So it's a variation of ro'eh. So it's like Joseph was like a bit lording it over his brothers maybe, telling them how to do their job. Hey, look, it's not a good idea to eat the best sheep because you're eating the best of your father's assets. Okay? Not a good idea. And I think that we do similar things in the spiritual realm if we look at shepherding as a responsibility and accountability, and we attack, if you like, and we destroy some of the best sheep in God's pasture. Think about it. So I'll just read you the Hebrew. Don't laugh at me, but I'm going to read you the Hebrew from this particular passage. It says, Ilah toldot Yaakov, Yosef ben Shava Esre Shana Haya Ro'et. Yaakov Batzon Vahua Na'ar et Bene Bilha Vet Bene Zilfa Nashe Aviv Vayavev Yosef et Tibatam Ra'a El Avahim. Or Avahim. So that was my Hebrew reading. Now, as this drama is unfolding, because Joseph has these inherent qualities of a shepherd, and he's not necessarily seeing them in his brothers, and there's a bit of contention there. We have to ask ourselves, now, was Joseph being a bit of a pain in all this, telling tales to his father and all that? Or did he understand his purpose and his calling and the responsibilities of a shepherd at a very early age? Was he just different? Okay, let's just have a quick look at Joseph. In Jewish literature, of course, I mentioned that Joseph is the youngest son of Jacob and Rachel. He was born to older parents. Jacob was about 90 years old when Joseph was born. His mother died when he was a teenager. Terrible, terrible thing. Very tragic to lose your parent when you're a teenager. I lost my dad when I was 13. Very, very tragic. It's a very, very stressful thing, I can tell you. He was taken away into slavery when he was 17 and separated from his family. Again, huge, huge trauma. Joseph was a dreamer, and in the sense that God was communicating with him in dreams and showing him the future. Now, Joseph had to grow up very fast. Remember when his brothers, it really struck me when I was reading that passage. His brothers, there's famine, and they're all sitting around twiddling their thumbs going, what do we do? And there's Joseph running a country. So his brothers were terribly cruel to him, and they made him really suffer. For what? For being a better shepherd than what they were, for having dreams, for predicting the future. Now, I was told by an Orthodox Jew when I was studying Hebrew a few years ago, I made friends with an Orthodox Jew. I know that people are going to say, Orthodox Jew men won't talk to. Well, he did. He was a traveling salesman of some kind. And quite often when he was in places by himself, he would never use Skype to allow us to see me or see him. We couldn't see each other, but we would quite often have conversations, deep conversations about spiritual things. And actually I learned quite a lot from him. He was a very, very nice man. I don't know where he is or who he is really. Could be anybody. But I know he used to travel around a lot. Anyway, so I was told by him one day we were having this conversation, and he said that he visited, some of these pits, like they're sort of still around there or something that Joseph was put into, or one that was similar to what Joseph was put into. And he said there was an enormously powerful echo in the area, and that noise carried through in waves, and you could hear it miles and miles away. Now, Joseph's screams, they would have been actually terrible to hear. And he would have cried out to his brothers to save him from the pit, and they didn't. They showed no mercy. Now, again, I'm going to quote from Genesis Rabba, and it states in Genesis Rabba that these pits were infested with scorpions and snakes, and that Joseph was stripped of his garments and he was thrown into the pit nude, okay? And left there for 3 days before he was sold to the Ishmaelites. Now that makes the whole thing so much more worse, I think. For a 17-year-old boy to be thrown away from his family, rejected by all his brothers, to be thrown into the pit with snakes and scorpions naked, and then left there for 3 days in this horrible, horrible place. But Joseph was a good guy, and in the end he was grateful for his ordeal, because he was able to save many people by the things that he suffered. Now, for me, this recalls the suffering of Jesus Christ. Because of the things that he suffered, he's also able to save many people, including me. Now, many things impress me about the life of Joseph, but none more so than Joseph's ability to make decisions. So Joseph made decisions about Potiphar's wife. Now, he decided that he was going to interpret dreams. He decided that he was going to get himself out of prison. Yeah, good on him. And he made decisions on how to manage the worst famine in the land that the land had ever seen. And we can also make decisions. We can learn to make decisions. You can actually do a course at university, a master's level on decision making. A lot of business people are involved in that. So decision making is not like a stab in the dark. People think, oh, you make decisions. It's not a stab in the dark. Decision making is a calculated process, and you can learn to make decisions even from a very young age by making lots of decisions and making more and more decisions. So we can see that in the life of Joseph, that there was this tremendous persecution, if you like, and pressure and all that. But all that came together in order to form this person that was going to be almost like a Messiah to his people. So that's why he was the ro'et, because he had that heart of a shepherd. Now, the third category that I'm going to talk about is the hired servant shepherd, and that one concerns us more than these other two that I talked about, the owner operator and the son. Okay. Now we are to me, I think we are like the hired shepherd. And if the owner operator cannot operate his business for any reason and he has no son, or his Rachel and Jacob have left, and then he needs to hire somebody. And that person is called a hired shepherd. So hired shepherd, is on a wage. I do believe that we are on a wage. We are on a spiritual wage. I believe that God gives us some of our wages here on earth. And I think that the rest of the wages are going to come when we go into heaven. I don't think that we should seek wages. I think that we should just take what God gives us. And it's very much a part of the New Testament, in the New Testament church. If you can read in the Didache, that, if you called yourself an apostle or a prophet, you got nothing. You got nothing from the church. You got your food, you got water, and then when you left that area, you got enough food and water to get you to the next area, and you lived purely 100% by faith. Okay, interesting. Yeah, don't live like that anymore, but that's the way it should be, I think. So if the hired shepherd loses a sheep or whatever, he has to pay compensation to his lord and master, kind of like, you bought it, you broke it. Now, for this, I'm going to quote from the Maori documents, because now the Maori documents are very, very interesting, because I can see a lot of correlation between them and actually what's happening in the Bible, in this whole scenario of, Jacob and Laban and whatnot, because it was about the same time. So these ancient documents, called the Maori documents, were found in the Tel Hariri on the banks of the Euphrates, and we get a good understanding of all sorts of expectations that existed between owner, operator, and hired shepherd. Yeah. So the Maori documents were excavated in 1933 to 1938, and over 20,000 cuneiform documents were found. Now, most of them are from the 1800 BC period. That's about 3,800 years ago, very close again to the time of the patriarchs. And the Maori documents actually have the similar names. They have Sarah, they have Terah, they have Abraham, they have Laban. Now, these guys, they worship the moon god, whom they called Nana. And the symbol of this moon god was the crescent moon. Now, in ancient times, the sun was the male, the moon was the female. So in other words, the sun was the male, the man, the father. The moon was the female, the mother. The stars were the children. Now you say, oh, well, that's pagan. Well, no, it's not, because that was exactly what Joseph dreamt. Okay? He dreamt about his mother, the sun, the moon, and the stars bowing down to him. What did he mean? His mother, father, and his brothers well, his mother wasn't there, but technically she was, really. She was in the family. They would bow down to him, right? So the Mari documents also speak of male and female prophets who prophesied, and there's even evidence that they had to go and, prophesy to kings, because when the kings needed guidance, these prophets were called up to prophesy. Now, I'm not suggesting here that the Hebrews, were a group of they were Hebrews, that the Mari people, felt, the Maris were Hebrews or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that. But a lot of the way that they lived their life corresponds to the lives of the Hebrews and is actually confirmed in the Bible. Now, that is one of the great things about studying about archaeology and where, it kind of fits together. It gives you a better understanding of what's actually happening in the Bible times, because it's not always explained in the Bible. So I'm just going to show you here on a slide the contrast, contract, if you like, that was discovered amongst the Mari documents, and it was translated by Israel Finkelstein and published in the Journal of American Oriental Society. Now, if you're thinking that workplace agreements are some sort of a modern day concept, then you think again, because these were actually in reality, they were some sort of a workplace agreement. So the hired shepherd received a portion of the newborn animals, 92 ewes, 20 rams, 22 breeding lambs, 24 spring lambs, 33 she-goats, 4 male goats, 27 kids, total of 158 sheep, 64 goats, which Shinshuma entrusted to Dada the shepherd. So then Dada assumes liability, therefore, and will replace any lost animals. Now, should Nidanatam, this is the third party in all this, Dada's shepherd boy, absence himself, he will bear responsibility and subsequent losses. Now, Dada will also have to pay 5 kos of barley, and it was signed by 3 witnesses in Shamu Luna, year 1, 4th month, and the 16th day. Wow. Now, that is an example of an ancient Near East workplace agreement, where everybody is allocated their responsibility, and there is the owner-operator, then there's the one that's been entrusted, with the sheep, and then there's the shepherd boy, who's working, the hired person, the third party. You can't always do it all yourself. You need other people to help you. So if there was a breach of contract, compensation had to be paid. In this case, it was Dada, who was the hired shepherd, and by Nidanatam's Dada, shepherd's boy, he had to pay compensation. So this brings me to the close of part 2 of my teaching on the Good Shepherd. And we need to take shepherding quite seriously. And I'll just say a few more things and then I'll just wind up. And by the time I'm finished with this teaching, you'll be left with no doubt, as to what shepherding is. So just a refresher, the number 1 occupation of God's people in the Bible was that of a shepherd. They were both male and female shepherds. Joseph was more than a shepherd. He was a ro'et. I divided shepherds into 3 categories: owner-operator, family business, and hired shepherd. Now, Jesus fell into the category of family business, the son. He was careful not to lose any sheep. He knew the rules. He had a title as the Good Shepherd, special title for the son. And we fall into the category of hired shepherd, and the penalty for losing sheep are severe for us. Now, hands up all those who want to be shepherds. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 17, the Apostle Paul says, "Obey those that watch over you." The Greek means obey those that are sleepless over you. Shepherding means being sleepless. Jacob said to Laban in Genesis 31, verse 40, "The drought consumed me by day and the frost by night. My sleep departed from my eyes." Now, Jacob was sleepless over Laban's sheep. Probably that's why he was so successful. Good shepherds watch their sheep, care for their sheep, and protect their sheep. But the word watch doesn't only mean just looking out for, it also means to give an account. Do you understand that? To watch over something means to actually have to give an account of that situation. And something comes to mind here, in Genesis when Cain slew Abel. And God said, where's Abel? He said, Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? Duh, yeah, you are. You are your brother's keeper. Right? So you see the audacity of Cain to say to God, am I my brother's keeper? And this is exactly what shepherding is. Shepherding is watching over your brothers, the other sheep, or the sheep that God's given you to watch over, watching over them and being accountable. And Cain wasn't doing that. Cain wasn't accountable. He's like, what's it to me? I want to finish off now with a bit more about Joseph. And Joseph had a dream. In the dream, he was binding sheaves. Now, a shepherd binding sheaves, you cannot understand that again until you read some more in the Mari documents. So one of the Mari tablets says that shepherds were also required to bring in the harvest. Most of the time they're watching sheep, but they also had to bring in the harvest. I just lost my page. There it is there. The best shepherds got to bring in the harvest. When Joseph said to his brothers, I will bind sheaves, he became a problem for them because what he was saying is, I am going to rise to fame. And they knew that. You see, we have to think about these dreams and that and try and figure out what the meaning was. These guys, they just knew. They knew that God uses symbolism in order to speak to them. They knew the symbols. If you know the symbols, you can understand the meaning of the dreams and visions. If you don't know the symbols, you're like, oh, what does it mean, Harvesters were greater than shepherds. So rather than encourage him and allow him to rise to the top, instead they conspired to kill him. So in the next session, I'm going to speak more about the function of a shepherd and how it relates to Christian New Testament. I'm also going to talk about something really interesting because I'm going to show you that, how Christians always look at the life of Joseph and they say, Joseph was a type of Messiah, and Jesus and Joseph shared a lot of things that were very, very similar, and they did. A lot of their experiences were very, very similar. Now, we have exactly the same thing in Jewish literature, except Jesus is not that person. Ben Joseph, the coming Messiah, or the forerunner to the Messiah, who is Ben David. Ben Joseph is really the Messiah. So they also see this connection, and Joseph was a type of Messiah, just like he is to Christians, except that the fulfillment of the Christian Messiah was actually in Jesus, and the Jews are sort of still waiting for their Messiah to come. So I look forward to part 3 of this series. Thank you so much for listening. I don't always ask for this, but if you could like this video or comment, that would be fantastic. And also please subscribe to my channel because I don't push it. I would love to get some more people on there. So thank you so much and God bless you. Bye.